Good morning and welcome to the Shrine of Remembrance. The dawn service will begin soon, and as we come together on the lands of the Bunurong, I invite Uncle Mark Brown, Bunurong Elder, to present the Welcome to Country.
Good morning. I am Uncle Mark Brown, Elder and Senior Cultural Heritage Officer of the Bunurong Land Council, Gunditjmara man on my mother's side, and Bunurong man on my father's side. And today I'm here to welcome you to beautiful Bunurong country. Before we do that, we pay our acknowledgements and we pay our respects. We pay our respects to all of my ancestors. We pay our respects to all of my elders. And we pay our respects to all of my community members, past, present, and emerging. And we acknowledge the continuous and unbroken connection to country for the Bunurong people. We also pay acknowledgements and respects to all traditional owners, Aboriginal and Torres Strait, who work, rest, live or play on Bunurong country. And we thank you all for being here with us. But as we gather here today, in unity, in love, and in respect, we recognise that this welcome is a part of our shared journey. It's a shared journey of reconciliation, and it's a shared journey of understanding. By acknowledging and encompassing the deep ritual heritage of the Bunurong people and all of our traditional owners, we all strive to foster mutual respect, cultural exchange, and a celebration of diversities. So as we gather here today, we recognise that our people are one. All of our ancestors and all of the people that we lost and all of the people that gather here today. We recognise this with a welcome to country. We recognise this by recognising we are on Bunurong lands and we come together as a family. So Wamajenka Balakiaka, Ngata Bunurong Balag Bik, and welcome. Welcome to beautiful Bunurong country. Please walk it with soft feet and very, very open hearts.
Mark, thank you very much, Uncle Mark. Ladies and gentlemen, the dawn service will begin shortly. Harold Edward Elliott was an Australian officer. He landed at Gallipoli on this very day in 1915 with 16,000 other ANZACs. Pompey Elliott, as they called him, was a tough but emotional man. He could be heard yelling and swearing at a soldier one day and then found sobbing over news of the man's death the next. So he knew about war, but he knew about something else, not just what a war was, but he knew how war should be remembered. From Gallipoli, he wrote a letter to a friend. He said, "When someone speaks to you of the glory of war, just picture yourself in a narrow trench, 2 or even 3 deep with bodies, mangled and torn by bombs, blackened and bloated by decay, and think of them as though they had once been your best friends, and then live among them for days. Because," he wrote, "whatever the novelists may say, this is war, and such is glory." In that letter, Pompey Elliott seemed to forge the way his country should talk about war ever since. We don't decorate war as though it was a Christmas tree or use poems like beautiful paintings covering ugly walls. And we don't search for gentle words when hard ones are required. Instead, we come here to know the sacrifice, the courage over fear, the loss, the sadness, the brutality, the service, the mateship, and the loyalty. And today, 109 years after Pompey Elliott landed into the horror of Gallipoli, we're here again, waiting for dawn, and wishing we could go back and tell the ones who lost so much, who left home for the last time, the mothers and fathers who waited for them, the children and widows who had to live without them, and the injured and the suffering who had to find a way to go on. We wish we could go back and tell them that we're here on April 25, 2024. We are here. And that with every new dawn on Anzac Day, our gratitude only becomes stronger, our understanding clearer, and our hearts fuller. And that we're here to tell the stories right, just as Pompey Elliott wanted, because such is glory. Good morning. My name is Justin Smith. On behalf of RSL Victoria, welcome to the Shrine of Remembrance in our city of Melbourne, and it's an honour to stand with you. And as we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we meet today, the Bunurong people, we remember the thousands of First Nations people who fought for their country, often defending rights they didn't yet have themselves. And we thank the many who are still serving in uniform today. This Anzac Day, in particular, we thank and honour those who served in the peacekeeping and peacemaking forces. It's a long history and a proud one. Australians were the first ever peacekeepers on the ground. That was 1947, Indonesia, as the Dutch forces withdrew. Those first peacekeepers were Brigadier Lewis Dyke, Navy Commander Henry Chesterman, Air Force Squadron Leader Lou Spence, and Army Major David Campbell. Since then, 70,000 Australians have followed them for peace, because somewhere there's always the beginnings of a fight, or the middle, or the painful aftermath. They have served across the world at Cambodia, the Solomon Islands, Kashmir, the Congo, East Timor, Somalia, the Middle East. And often our forces were in place for years, like Cyprus, beginning in 1964 and staying until 2021. And our peacekeeping men and women often served with little recognition. Perhaps it's because the word peace can soften the reality of their duty and make the trauma they endured seem less damaging. But that's not the real story. And not all our people got to come home when the job was over. In 1988, Captain Peter McCarthy was killed by a landmine in Lebanon. A comrade put it beautifully and simply: Peter was a bloody good soldier. Major Susan Fulcher, a medical officer, became the first woman since World War II to be killed in an overseas military operation when the small plane she was in crashed in Western Sahara, 1993. On her gravestone it reads, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Private Jamie Clark, a paratrooper with 3rd Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment, died in the Solomon Islands in 2005 while searching a cave for weapons. His mother still describes him as my son, my soldier, my hero. Many times against their training, our peacekeepers could not fight back, and this brought its own unique trauma as they witnessed human beings at their worst, when the enemy was not always clear and the allies not always reliable. Corporal Robin White was a combat photographer with our forces in Rwanda. She arrived the day after the Kabayo massacre, where thousands were killed. She pointed her camera at what she thought was a rubbish tip in the distance. And then as she scanned down, she focused on the first body. It was a child. Then she lifted the lens again to see that it wasn't a rubbish tip at all, but just more of the same. Many, like Robin White, had to bring those horrors home, often surrounded by people who had never heard of the places they'd been. To our peacemakers and our peacekeepers, you have our thanks and our love. You make us proud, and we're sorry if that pride has ever been too much in silence. Because as we look at the world now, we know you'll be needed again. Such is glory. Many Australians who served in the air or on land or the sea would never have thought of themselves as leaders and never expected to make decisions that would mean the death or survival of others. But they became leaders just when we needed them. General Sir John Monash is considered the greatest of our wartime leaders, and long before his name was a city council, a university or a well-driven freeway, Monash was commander at the Western Front. He inspired, not with pomp, but with plans. And he brought his men with him, so his plans were their plans too, and a belief that war did not exist just so he could be a general, but rather that he was a general so they could get it over with and get on with the business of peace. And beyond the top brass, the list of Australian leaders goes on, like Jack Kirby, Company Sergeant Major, and a hero at Vietnam's Battle of Long Tan, where he risked his life to carry wounded, supply his men with ammunition, and hold their spirits through the long fight. Albert Choan was a leader, but first he was a lad cutting shirts at David Jones. And then came World War II, and he joined up as a private, but in just a few short years, he was a lieutenant in New Guinea, where his platoon was being torn up by machine gun fire, and he led a charge urging his men to follow. He was hit twice, but he kept going until he was killed. And just before the fight, Albert sent roses to his beautiful new wife, Daphne, back home. The flowers arrived right before the news of his death. Captain Reginald Newton was a leader, taken prisoner by the Japanese in 1942, and after 60 hours of interrogation, found himself the highest-ranking Australian among the POWs. So he led and protected the lives of his men by risking his own and standing up to their captors. Royal Australian Navy Captain Hector Waller was a leader, a boy from Benalla who served in both World Wars and was called the outstanding officer of his generation. He was killed at the Battle of Sanders Strait, and the last order he gave after the HMAS Perth was hit by torpedoes was for his men to abandon ship, an order that he himself didn't obey. Warrant Officer Keith Payne, Victoria Cross recipient of the Vietnam War, who turns 91 this year, has a firm and simple philosophy on leadership. He says, you either accept the responsibility or you bloody well don't. Well, the more than 40 men that he saved one night in 1969 were bloody well glad he did. But sometimes our leaders had no rank and there were no medals waiting for them. Lillian Cooper was only the second woman in Australia to become a doctor. And before the Great War, she was described as a skilled and cool surgeon. She was also called a tall and energetic woman who was prone to bad language. So we can only imagine her response when fighting began and she wanted to serve, but was told to stay home and knit for the soldiers. She didn't. Instead, she volunteered with the Scottish Women's Hospital and went to the Serbian front, 1914, where she found that too many wounded men were dying on their way to hospital. So she set up a dressing station with a team of all women and put themselves dangerously close to the front, risking their lives to save lives. But it's what real leaders do, and it's what our leaders in war did for us. And when we think about those who joined up to go to fight, we imagine them as brave, loyal to each other, or larrikins. But we don't think of them as telling lies, yet a few of them did. They lied when they were asked this question: how old are you, son? Alec Campbell told a lie in 1915. He said he was 18 years old and he was only 16, but they took him. And there, standing barely an inch taller than his rifle and bayonet, they sent him to Gallipoli. But they get younger. Private Douglas Wood told them he was an 18-year-old baker from Hawthorne. He lied. He was a 14-year-old schoolboy, and soon he was a 14-year-old schoolboy serving on the Western Front with the 59th Infantry Battalion, where he was killed at the Battle of Fromelles. And they get younger still. Private James Martin was not that long out of the Glenferrie Primary School when he threatened to run away from home if his parents didn't let him join the big adventure. Don't worry about me. I'm doing splendid over here, he wrote his parents from Gallipoli. I remain your loving son. He became ill and died on the hospital ship and buried at sea, still only 14 years old. It's easy to think of it as another time, almost another world, but we know that children are children, just as beautiful and just as irreplaceable as the ones rugged up and standing with us this morning. The boy soldiers didn't lie to get a drink or drive or to impress. They lied because they were in a hurry to serve. We wish they didn't, but we feel a sad, aching pride that they did. And how can we ever repay them for those lies? The loss of the young will always be war's most painful consequence. And searching through the records or walking along a row of gravestones, you can see the names of people we lost and that small number beside it. Corporal Matthew Hopkins, Afghanistan War, 21 years old. Ordinary Seaman Ray Butterfield, Vietnam War, 18 years old. Lance Corporal William Murphy, Korean War, 22. Spitfire pilot, Flying Officer Neville Fleming, World War II, 19 years old. Private Benjamin Renato, Afghanistan War, 22. Lieutenant Nurse Barbara Black, Vietnam War, 25. Flying Officer Neil McKissick-Thulis, Second World War, 22. Sapper Jamie Larkham, Afghanistan War, 21. Ordinary Seaman Edward Teddy Sheehan, Victoria Cross recipient, World War II, 18 years old. Some are at rest around the world, at places like Villas Bretna, where the soil seems full of an entire generation, and some are here at home, in war cemeteries like Springvale, by the gum trees. And some were never found. But though the headstones may look a bit the same, each person went to war with the things that made them unique, their own skills and beliefs and things that made them happy, and their own plans for what to do when it was over. And all of them had people waiting at home, wanting nothing more in this life than just to see them again. But like the more than 103,000 other Australians killed in war, the number of their last birthday is frozen forever, and their lives will always be incomplete, and they did it for us. For our futures, and we know that we can never live enough years or see enough dawns on Anzac Day to ever fully thank them. It's almost morning, and those words of Harold Pompey Elliott sit with us in the dark. This is war, and such is glory. His caution never to let the stories become too pretty. So it would dishonour this courageous and inspiring man who lived through some of the world's fiercest battles not to tell the end of his story. After the war, Pompey Elliott suffered from what would become known as post-traumatic stress disorder and took his own life at the age of just 52. As a member of our Defence Force, this suffering and this ending is not unique to him. It wasn't then, and it isn't now. Many of our veterans feel like they've lost themselves, disconnected from their families, unsafe, alone, trapped in addiction, and loaded down with memories. They are our reminder that the words, "lest we forget," are also for the living. So we're here for the leaders, the fighters, the lifesavers, the boy soldiers, the families who waited for them, the peacekeepers, the peacemakers, and the ones still searching for peace, to honour them, to thank them, and to carry their memory forward. Sometimes it will be in the stories we tell, and sometimes just in the silence. This silence, with our heads full of images and our hearts of gratitude, knowing that Pompey Elliott got the words right. Such is glory, unless we forget. With the official party, please be upstanding for the dawn service.
Stand to!
Dr. Robert Webster, State President RSL Victoria, will recite from the Ode.
They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Stand down.
Would the members of the official party please be seated? I now invite Her Excellency Professor the Honourable Margaret Gardner, Governor of Victoria, to present the Anzac Day address.
The Honourable Jacinta Allen, Premier of Victoria, Senator Raf Tichoni, representing the Prime Minister of Australia, Her Excellency Vicky Treadle, High Commissioner of the United Kingdom, John Pesutto, Leader of the Victorian Opposition, Senator the Honourable Jane Hume, representing the Leader of the Federal Opposition, Councillor Nicholas Rees, Deputy Mayor, Lord Mayor, representing the Lord Mayor of Melbourne, Shane Patton, Chief Commissioner of Victoria, Captain Stephen Bowater, Chair of the Shrine Trustees, and Dean Lee, CEO, Shrine of Remembrance, Dr Robert Webster, State President, Sue Cattermole, CEO, and members of RSL Victoria and members of other ex-service organisations, Victorian senior officers and members of the Australian Defence Force, representatives of the New Zealand Defence Force, United Kingdom and other defence forces, members of the Consular Corps. Let me begin by acknowledging that we gather here today on the unceded lands of the Boonwurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and thank in particular Uncle Mark Brown for his warm welcome to country this morning. I also want to acknowledge on this day those who have served or represent those who have served in the conflicts since that first Great War who are with us today, and thank you for your service. War, Klaus von Clausewitz famously said, is the continuation of politics by other means. Military historian John Keegan disputed this view, arguing that war exists, and I quote, in a world apart, a very ancient world, which exists in parallel with the everyday world, but does not belong to it. That war does exist in parallel with the everyday world is something of which we are reminded by the conflicts that are with us in our world today. But what connects our everyday world with the terrors of war is the failure of diplomacy and politics, because countries only cross the bridge from peace to war when politics fails, and ultimately the price of the passage back from conflict is measured in human lives. Every war inflicts untold suffering on the men and women who are called upon through their service in these conflicts to do the extraordinary, and on all those not directly engaged in the conflict but often so terribly devastated by its impacts. This Day of Remembrance began in the blood, the bravery and the sacrifices that marked the shores of Gallipoli. And that particular Anzac experience came to stand for the way we would, as a new nation, speak for and with our people. As the great Australian poet Chris Wallace Crabbe put it when writing of Gallipoli, at the core of the myth, this truth is coiled like a snake, that the men who enact it cannot see what pattern they are tracing. The men who spoke Australia did not know what they wrought, for it was only defined by the completion of their lives. The remembrance in which we engage on Anzac Day is about all those affected by war and conflict, most significantly those who serve and have served, and it is a memory about the impact of war. Anzac Day matters not only because of the stories that were recorded, but because of the stories that went unrecorded, those who volunteered their lives and were not singled out for mention. We are here then to remember all those who cannot be remembered, the lost, the forgotten, the unknown. And we are here to promise to remember the human cost of conflict before we ever return to that parallel world of war. This is why it's right that this year's commemorations are shining a light on peacekeepers, peacemakers, and peace builders. After all, the best way to honour the sacrifices of those who have served our nation in wartime is to make every effort to promote and protect peace. Since 1947, Australia has been involved in 62 multilateral security operations in the pursuit of peace. Our participation in peacekeeping operations began when Brigadier Lewis Dyke, Major David Campbell, Commander Henry Chesterman and Squadron Leader Lewis Spence oversaw and reported on the conflict arising from Indonesia's push for independence. This year, for the first time, veterans of peacekeeping operations are leading Melbourne's Anzac Day commemorative march. The Australians who lost their lives in those peacekeeping missions, Australians from our police and defence forces, are listed, together with another 103,004 men and women, on the Australian War Memorial's Roll of Honour. All the names on the Roll of Honour matter, and they are written in the heart of our nation. Their sacrifices raise a question impossible to answer. How many lives were saved as a result of their ultimate sacrifice? I have no doubt that those who have served in peacetime and war have saved an untold number of lives. On behalf of the people of Victoria, I want to take this opportunity to thank all those Australians for their sacrifices. We are forever in your debt. Yet as we remember all those on this Anzac Day in 2024, let us remember this day also marks 110 years since the first Australian casualties of World War I, 80 years since Australian forces won the battle for New Guinea, and 10 years since combat operations in Afghanistan ceased. Join with me in the hope that our commitment to peace will keep us from crossing that bridge to war once more and save us for peace and the keeping of the peace, lest we forget.
Thank you, Governor. The poem In Flanders Fields by Colonel John McCrae will now be recited by Ms. Halima Chowdhury, Shrine of Remembrance Young Ambassador.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Thank you, Halima. The Melbourne Symphony Orchestra Chorus, accompanied by the Army Band, present Abide With Me. Will the members of the official party please stand? The Melbourne Symphony Orchestra Chorus and the Army Band will now present the national anthems of New Zealand and Australia.
Matura, let every state advance Australia fair. In joyful strength then let us sing, advance Australia fair. Beneath our radiant Southern Cross we'll toil with hearts and hands to make this commonwealth of ours renowned of all the lands. For those who've come across the seas, we've boundless flames to share. With courage let us all combine to advance Australia fair. In joyful strength then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
The official party will now move to the sanctuary of the Shrine of Remembrance, where the Governor will lay a wreath. Members of the official party will collect symbolic red poppies, which they will lay at the stone. The poppies were the first flowers to grow in the spring of Flanders and across the battled, mangled landscape of the Western Front during the First World War. And the sweet and delicate red bloom became a sign of life, a sign of remembrance, sacrifice, giving, and a sign of love, and a symbol that whatever horror had gone before, that there would be a tomorrow, and there would still be a future. With the official party in position in the sanctuary, I invite the Shrine Guard to take post. The Governor will now lay a wreath at the Stone of Remembrance on behalf of the people of Victoria. The Governor will now depart the sanctuary while the pipes and drums of 5th 6th Battalion Royal Victoria Regiment perform Sands of Kuwait with the Army Band. The official party will lay their poppies as they follow the Governor's departure. Shrine Guard, dismount. That concludes the Anzac Day dawn service. You will shortly be invited to lay a poppy in the sanctuary, and you'll be welcome to make your way to the North Steps. On behalf of RSL Victoria, thank you for joining us here at the Shrine as we make our quiet promises to always remember those who served and those who loved them and miss them still. Good morning, and lest we forget.